Okay, everyone, ever since I made that blondie recipe video, I've had requests for its counterpart, brownies. So I think it's due to make some brownies that are chewy and delicious with fresh milled flour. So let's get started. Okay, to get started, I'm going to go ahead and start preheating my pan so we can get our butter browned. Just going to use a cup of butter or 2 sticks, and I'll make sure to put a link to the recipe in the description box below. That way you can see it in grams, weight, and volume. Start letting that melt down. Okay, once it starts to melt like this, we want to make sure that we're stirring it around so that we don't have anything scald or burn. And you can see it's still this nice golden buttery color. And if you want to chop these up as it starts to melt, these bigger sticks still, you can do that to incorporate it in. But stay close by because this can boil over. You want to make sure that you're using a pan that is much larger than the amount of butter that you put in here, because it will start to foam up and it could bubble over. So now the 2 sticks are all the way melted completely. So I want to make sure to just stir it pretty often. And it'll start to bubble and like boil a little bit. And there's a little foam on top, but after you get past this boiling point, then you'll see it'll start to foam up and kind of creep up the pan a little bit. That's when you want to make sure you're stirring it very often, because once it gets to the foam up stage, it goes brown pretty darn quickly. And you can see the bubbles are starting for the boiling. Just want to keep moving it just a little bit. And now it's starting to want to foam. You can see the beginning of the rising of the foam. And I have noticed that some butters will foam more than other butters. I don't know why that is. I'm guessing it has to do with the moisture content in the butter and the quality of the butter. I've noticed that better quality butters don't seem to foam up quite as much as lower cost butters do. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. But here we're bubbling away. And essentially what this is doing is the liquids are boiling off the butter so that we're left with only the butter solids, and that is what starts to brown and give us that caramely, delicious flavor that we recognize when we hear brown butter. Now this is that area where it really starts to foam up, that second foaming I was talking about. And this is where we start to get some browning happening. So you can see in the center it's a little bit darker color. I hope you can see that darker color that we're getting. And just want to stir it around. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it off the heat now, because I can see that I've got the color in here that I'm looking for. It's hard to see past the foam, but even the color of the foam changes. But there you go, you could see that browned butter. Be careful because this is very hot, obviously. I'm going to pull this off the heat. And remove my induction cooktop here. Careful, this is hot. But now you can see that beautiful browned butter the color I'm talking about here. Just want to stir it a little bit more because my pan holds heat for a little while and I don't want it to burn to the bottom. And to this, I'm going to add 1.5 cups of brown sugar. Okay, and this brown sugar really helps to give us that nice, chewy texture in the brownie. So I just want to just mix this around in with that browned butter. I took it off the heat, notice, so I'm not cooking the brown sugar. We don't want a hard candy here. This is very similar to how I made my blondies. And if you want to check that recipe out, I have a video making biscuits and blondies. I can put a link to that. And you can check that video out after this one's done. Okay, and then now comes the magic. This is just 1 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips. You could use dark chocolate here, you could use milk chocolate, whatever chocolate you prefer for brownies. But these are gonna go right into this, it's not boiling hot liquid, but it's gonna go right into this hot brown sugar and butter mixture. And we're gonna stir those in and let those start to melt. And for these brownies, we are going to use a little bit of cocoa powder as well, but this is most of the chocolate flavoring that we're going to get for the brownies. If you want to add chocolate chips where you actually keep the chocolate chips in the brownies, you can do that as well, but you won't want to do that here because it will surely melt the chocolate chips. As you can see, it's kind of all become one mixture here. I'm just going to stir this in until all the chocolate chips have melted and then set that aside. And while this cools a little bit, we don't want it to cool for hours and hours or anything like that because we don't want this to turn into a solid log of chocolate. But as this cools, we're going to go ahead and mill our flour. Okay, so we're going to be using soft white wheat here. I suppose you could probably use spelt or kamut or a mixture of those, but today I'm going to be using soft white wheat. So we're going to use 180 grams of that. So I'm just going to measure that out by weight. But again, I will have the volume and of the wheat berries to mill and the volume of flour. That way, depending on which way you like to bake, all of those are in that recipe for you. Change it to grams, zero that out. Okay, so that's 180 grams of soft white wheat. I'm going to just grab my little bowl here. This one's a bigger one than I normally use. But I have 180 grams of wheat berries, and I'm going to mill this, and it'll give me 180 grams of flour. So I find that a super convenient way to measure when we are working with fresh milled flour. So that's just a little tip for you if you're interested in doing your recipes by weight. Picking up one of these like digital kitchen scales. They're usually pretty inexpensive. I could put a link to the one I use here in the description box below if you'd like to take a look at that. So I'm just going to turn this on, tighten it a little bit, and then put my wheat berries in here and then tighten it just a little bit more. That it's done, so I'm going to loosen the stones a little bit. Make sure I get all the flour out and then turn it off. And I've got my fresh milled flour. So let's take it over to our table there and go ahead and add our dry ingredients together. Okay, so now we have our fresh milled flour. This is still cooling. So to our fresh milled flour, we're going to do 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/8 of a cup of cocoa powder. And then you can whisk this together or just use a fork to get these dry ingredients incorporated here. Okay, I just want to make sure my cocoa powder got broken all apart. And I'm going to set this to the side. So now I've got my wet ingredients, my dry ingredients, but I still need to add a few things to my wet ingredients here. And at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and line my baking tray here with parchment paper. Okay, so I'm going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees. This is going to take somewhere between 25 and 35 minutes depending on your oven. But you don't want to overbake these because you want that nice chewy brownie. I'm using a 9x13 pan here that fits in my little oven there. And I like to line it with parchment paper. It's easier to clean up and nothing sticks. You could also make this in an 8x8, and I will try to put baking instructions if you want to make either size. So if you want it to be thicker or a thinner brownie. So I'll put that in the recipe in the description box below. Okay, that's ready to go. So I like to use my mixer when I'm making these. It's probably not 100% necessary. You could probably do this in just a regular mixing bowl, but I like to make sure that all of my wet and dry gets combined completely. So let me grab my mixer. And since I have a metal bowl, it makes it nice and handy to go ahead and put this warm liquid in. I don't have to worry about any plastic leaching or anything like that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pour our chocolate, butter, brown sugar, delicious gooiness into our metal mixing bowl here. If you need help with this part, get help with this part. If you have a heavy pan like me and my wrists aren't super great, sometimes I need help. But I did let this one cool down enough that I could hold lower enough down on the handle, whereas in the past it's been a little hot here still, so I haven't been able to do it myself. Okay, I made a little mess there. Just gonna clean that up. Okay, and to this I'm gonna add about a teaspoon of vanilla. That could have been a little more than that. And as you all know, I like to make my own homemade vanilla. And if you didn't know that and you're interested in learning to make your own, I have a video on that too I can link. So this is a fairly easy recipe, but I think this is the hardest part of it. So we're gonna add 3 eggs to the recipe here. This was very hot. Obviously, we don't want to add eggs to boiling hot and cook our eggs. So the hardest part here is finding the right temperature of when to add our eggs, as opposed to too hot, we could scramble the eggs, too cold, and it could start to solidify. So our mixture here is Alexa, at what temperature does eggs cook?
According to an Alexa Answers contributor, eggs begin to start setting at 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, so I asked my Alexa, and she says that at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, eggs start to cook. We are at 120 here, 120. So we can go ahead and put in our eggs. We don't want it to be anywhere near or over 140, because then we'll cook our eggs. So again, it's not really hard, but that's the hardest part. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 3 eggs into our mixture here. We're looking good. Nothing's cooking. Maybe I'll just wash my hands real quick. Okay, we're going to go ahead and mix this around to break up the eggs and get it incorporated. Okay, look how delicious that looks. Nice and shiny and chocolatey. Okay, so we're going to take our dry ingredients now and we're going to add this straight to the mixture. Okay, I went ahead and put it all in there. And we're going to mix that around. Start out slow, then you can put it up to 2. We don't want to overmix this and we don't want to knead this or anything like that. Overmixing it can obviously cause a tough brownie. We don't want that to happen, but it is a little bit harder to, it is a little bit harder to overmix soft white wheat. It doesn't really want to form gluten on its own, so you have a little bit of grace here, unlike you would if you were using all-purpose flour. But you definitely want to make sure to scrape down your sides. Oops. I promise you these are better than any boxed brownie recipe you have ever had. And it took my family a while to find one of these brownie recipes to make with fresh milled flour, because we in the past had been so used to those boxed brownie mixes. They were so good that we couldn't recreate that with fresh milled flour. So I'm so happy that we were able to come up with this recipe, and it actually was by accident. This recipe came about when I was trying to make my blondie recipe, and I messed up a little bit, but it ended up giving me inspiration to work on a wonderful brownie recipe. Giving it one last mix. Alrighty, that is ready, everyone. Let's clean off our cookie paddle here. Nice and chocolatey. Oh, this smells incredible. I wish I had smell-o-vision for you. But I can. If you guys make this on your own, you will get to smell the delicious aroma that I'm smelling right now. Okay. Let me just move my mixer out of the way here. Oop. Okay, and I really love these because they're such a fast dessert to whip up. Now you do need to leave time to let them cool before you can cut into them, but it's something super quick and easy that you can whip up. You don't have to wait for anything to rise. So we're just going to take this batter. You know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and spray this just to safeguard myself. Okay. And you can see the texture. It's thicker than cake batter, but thinner than cookie dough, if that helps. And again, I was saying earlier that you could choose the size of dessert that you want here. If you want like thicker bars and you just want maybe 9 servings of a really thick, gooey brownie, then you could make this in an 8x8. If you are looking to feed a little bit more people and have more servings, yes, they will be a little bit on the thinner side, but you will be able to get a whole tray with a 9x13. Okay. So I'm going to take and just try to evenly distribute as best as possible. It does kind of flatten out on its own in the oven a little bit, but you want to push it into the corners because it flattens out, but it doesn't really spread a whole lot. Okay. Just want to make sure we're even here. And if I haven't said before, my son's favorite dessert is a brownie. And if I have said before, I say it again. Every time I'm making anything that smells chocolatey or buttery or anything like that, he smells it instantly and is like, Mom, are you making brownies? So of course I love making those favorite treats for him occasionally. All right, these are gonna go in the oven for about 25 to 35 minutes. So while we're waiting for the brownies to bake, I actually have some dinner roll bread dough rising for tonight for dinner. If you're interested in that dinner roll recipe, I can link that below for you as well. Of course, it's made with fresh milled flour. Well, the rolls are ready to be shaped and the brownies are still baking, so I figured why not shape the rolls together? So let's go ahead and do it. Just gonna put a little bit of olive oil on my table here. And let me bring you in closer. Let's see if I can hurry up and get these shaped before the brownies get finished. It's a challenge for me because this is a double batch. Guys, we made it in time. With 3 minutes to spare and time for me to wash my hands and cover these up. Okay, so we got these trays done. I'm gonna put one in the refrigerator so that I have one to bake tomorrow. And I'm gonna bake one today as soon as these brownies are done baking. So I made it just in time. Take a look at those. Don't mind the dirty oven, but yum. Okay, so I'm going to actually let these cool on a wire rack inside the pan rather than put it on a hot pad. That way it helps the bottoms to cool faster. That way I can eat it faster. Yum. These are so good. Thanks for hanging out with me today while we made these delicious brown butter chewy brownies, and I shaped some dinner rolls with you. So don't forget to check out my blog at grainsandsmallplaces.net. You can find this recipe, the roll recipe, and all my other recipes, all fresh milled flour. So thanks for stopping by Grains and Small Places. Goodbye. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da.